The worst moment of a camp life was the awakening, when the 3 sure blows of a whistle tore us from our sleep. Prisoners had to leave the bunkers and assemble in the cold winter nights, often barefoot and in ragged shirts. The sick were forced outside, and anyone moving slowly faced brutal beatings. The thought of endless suffering brought despair. This is one of the least graphic depictions of the cruelty in the concentration camps that I read in a book called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist who found himself in a concentration camp in 1939. He began to write about his experiences in an effort to find meaning amid the absurdity of his situation, and more so offer hope for readers. I remember reading those lines for the first time and thinking about the immense suffering that this man had to endure, and the unjust nature of our world and the absurdity that surrounds us. Yet despite all, I was struck by his courage to keep going, to survive, and to create something meaningful. After reading this book, I couldn't help but compare and recognize the differences among us humans. On one side, we have those who complain and break down over the smallest problems. On the other side, there are people like Viktor Frankl who survive and keep moving forward even in the most undesirable circumstances. If you research online, you might come across the idea of genetic determinism. This idea suggests that some people are genetically predisposed to be more resilient, while others, especially those who are neurotic, might struggle with the same challenges, and simply there is nothing we can do about it. While I acknowledge that genetics play a significant role in shaping our temperament and personality, I can't fully embrace the idea of genetic determinism, simply because to believe in it entirely is incredibly limiting. It strips away your sense of personal agency and overlooks other crucial factors like environment and your mindset. I believe we can cultivate mental strength through habits, mindset changes, and intentional actions. I remember a time when something really small got under my skin. I had a minor accident with my car. I scratched it and the bumper fell off. I was incredibly nervous and sad. At that moment, having to spend $50 felt like a huge setback. I kept obsessing over a loss and thinking, why did I just lose the money? Fast forward to a more recent and significant challenge. A year ago, I bought my first apartment, and I didn't check the documents carefully, and turned out that the building wasn't officially registered, which could mean that if I ever wanted to sell it, there could be some major problems. Suddenly, the biggest investment of my life felt like a mistake. But surprisingly, I didn't react the same way. I remained calm. Just think about it. A $50 expense versus that enormous mistake. My reaction didn't match the scale of the situation. I found myself suffering more over the $50 loss than I did about the apartment issue. Focus on what is inside your control. While both challenges stemmed from my recklessness and lack of attention, my response was different. Because with the car incident, I let frustration consume me. But when I had to deal with the apartment situation, I embraced the philosophy of Stoicism. This is a simple philosophy that teaches us to focus on things that we can control, as this is the only thing that truly matters. Our past, other people's opinions, the weather, the economic situation, all of these are outside of our control. So much in life is beyond our influence. What we can control, however, is our body, the thoughts that we choose to focus on, and how we choose to act. It might sound difficult, but with enough practice, we can cultivate a mindset that prioritizes what is in front of us, rather than dwelling on the past. There is a famous quote often referred to as the serenity prayer. It goes like this: God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Another way to develop resilience is to be grateful. You need to understand that life is never guaranteed. Your current state of health, relationships, and everything around you is very fragile. The mere fact that you have them in your life should make you happy. I practice gratitude in a way that might seem strange, but it works for me. From time to time, when I feel myself getting too caught up in life's little problems, I imagine something truly terrible, something unimaginably painful. I picture it in such vivid detail that it stirs up real intense emotions. Then I bring myself to the present and I remind myself that none of it was real. It's like waking up from a terrible dream. You have this sense of overwhelming relief and joy when you recognize that it was all a dream and none of it was real. Another thing to keep in mind is contrast, perspective. All of our problems, big or small, are relative to what we compare them to. Without contrast or context, it's easy to get overly nervous and stressed about the challenges we face. For example, I recently dealt with a serious health issue caused by a friendly wrestling match. I injured my neck and I ended up with a protrusion, heaviness in the head, weakening arms, increased heart rate, anxiety, and so on and so forth. I've been feeling those symptoms for the last 4 or 5 months. Luckily, I'm getting better. But how did I stay resilient during this time when I felt at my worst? It wasn't by telling myself that this shouldn't have happened to me. When I focused on that, on imagining how my life would be if the accident didn't happen, when I kept thinking I could do this, I could do that, I wouldn't have to face those problems, it made things worse. Instead, I decided to accept the reality. I told myself, yes, it happened. Yes, it sucks. Well, yes, it's my fault because I wrestled with a guy that was 20 kilos heavier than me, but it's done. It's in the past. There's nothing I can do about it. What also helped me was putting my situation into perspective. It could have been worse. I thought about Michael Schumacher, the legendary Formula 1 driver who suffered a life-changing head injury while skiing. He ended up in a wheelchair, partially paralyzed, all because of a simple fall. When I compare my experience to something like that, it puts my pain and problems into context. Without contrast, it's so easy to get caught up in our little problems. But when we step back and look at things from a different perspective, or with a different angle, it makes things easier. We can manage things and just simply move forward. In conclusion, resilience isn't about avoiding hardship, but about how we choose to respond to it. By shifting our mindset, embracing gratitude, and looking at things from a broader perspective, we can face any challenge with strength and hope. Remember, it's not what happens to us, but how we respond to it that defines us. As Viktor Frankl later wrote, "We who lived in concentration camps can remember the men who walked through the huts comforting others, giving away their last piece of bread. They may have been few in number, but they offered sufficient proof that everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way."